heard enough over the last many years now that urbanization is the way of the world in the future, and more so for India, with the large numbers of people who are living already in urban conglomerations, and the many more, 300 million more perhaps, in the next 15, 20 years, who will be living within urban conglomerations. We've also heard today about the benefits of urbanization as well as the problems that come along with urbanization. It's very clear that India has not done a good enough job yet in managing the process of urbanization. Two reasons for this. The first is mentioned by Mrs. Mathur, that we had not as a country paid much attention to urbanization until very recently, but we can't now anymore ignore the needs of the numbers of people who are in urban conglomerations, which very shortly will be half or more of our population in the country. The second reason we haven't done a good enough job yet is that we haven't got a good enough approach to manage urbanization in this country. The Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, Phase 1, which concluded a year ago, our 7-year project, was the largest and most complex national program that India has had, I would say, since its independence. It was complex because it involved not merely giving money to projects. It was done through the states. The states are in charge of the process of urbanization, and more so because it required the reform of laws. One reason, there are two reasons for being more local. One is that solutions that are developed locally are always contextually more appropriate. They tend to use resources more appropriately when the solutions are developed by people locally. And His Excellency mentioned that this is a requirement in healthy urbanization. The second is a normative reason, I would say, the belief that if people are in charge of their own lives, they are more empowered and happier. Indeed, it has been found by studies all over the world that in those countries and those places where people are more in charge of their local places, more locally empowered, they get happier at a lesser GDP than in those places where they don't have this empowerment. And thus, if we want to pursue sustainable development in the world and create happiness without destroying too much of our environment and having to consume too much in the process of creating more GDP, we have to empower people to manage their own affairs. And so in India particularly, we must do this because the strain on our urban resources is already, our environmental resources is already so high. We cannot afford a process of trying to manage centrally the use of resources in local places, which will get long, as also disempowering people in managing their own affairs. We haven't done as a country enough, or hardly enough, to implement the 74th Amendment of our Constitution. It's 20 years ago. We are supposed to build, we must build more capabilities in people and more requirements for them to manage their own affairs.